Good afternoon and welcome to the 50/50 Women on Boards conversation on board diversity. My name is Mitzi Herrig, and along with co-chair Britton Dooley, we're delighted to host the 2021 Atlanta Conversation on Board Parity. We thank you for being here today and your commitment to learning how we can lead the way to achieve diverse and gender balanced boards. 50/50 is the premier global education and advocacy campaign committed to increasing the number of women directors on public company boards. Diverse boards and directors bring a valuable range of outlooks and experience, leading to improved and inclusive corporate governance. A board of directors with gender parity can offer more progressive insights and approaches, and studies have found a correlation between gender balanced boards and strong company performance. There's a significant value in maintaining an intentional and continuous commitment to diversity by ensuring that boards are representatives of the societies that they serve. Again, we thank each and every one of you for joining us here today to support achieving the imperative of gender balanced boards.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mitzi. And today's Atlanta conversation is made possible by the participation and support from our sponsors, VIP panelists, director coaches, and our Atlanta Leadership Committee. We are thrilled to shine a spotlight on our local sponsors, including Norfolk Southern. Hello to all of my NS colleagues attending today. Chevron, the Coca-Cola Company, Aon, Liberty Mutual, and Chart Industries. We are also pleased to highlight our global 50/50 sponsors. We want to acknowledge their continued commitment to supporting diversity and equity. Next, we thank our esteemed panel of Atlanta leaders donating their time and insight, including Vanessa Allen Sutherland, Rohit Verma, Virginia Hepner, Katie Bain, and B. Perez, who will be serving as our moderator today. We also applaud our experienced director coaches, Virginia Hepner, Scott Askins, and Mary Machado Scammell, who will be sharing their professional expertise and strategies with all of you in our breakout sessions after the VIP panel. And finally, to our dedicated Atlanta Leadership Committee, we thank you all for your enthusiasm and engagement throughout this year. Your volunteer time and hard work is so appreciated by us all. Before we begin, we do want to share that if at any time you have any technical difficulties, please click on the help center button located on the menu bar to the left of your screen. Also, we do encourage you to utilize the chat box to connect and engage with the other attendees today. Now, we are ready to kick off the event. It is with great pleasure that I introduce Betsy Berkemer-Crudere, the CEO of 50/50 Women on Boards. She is the author of 2 books, including The Board Game, How Smart Women Become Corporate Directors, and Winning the Board Game, How Women Directors Make the Difference. Betsy also led the successful campaign to secure passage of the first and only law in the United States requiring every public company headquartered in California to add more women board members before year-end 2021. She joins us today to review the progress on board diversity across the country, as well as the Atlanta market. Welcome, Betsy.
Thank you, Britton and Mitzi, our hardworking co-chairs for Atlanta. And welcome everybody in the audience and our speakers. We're so glad to be here. Atlanta is a very important city to us, and you are one of 30 events that we are putting on during the course of 2.5 weeks right now in November. We've made it to the halfway mark, and Atlanta is right before New York next week, and about 14 other events next week. And we also had Austin this morning, Mexico City, and Athens, Greece yesterday. Yes, indeed, because we are global. And in addition to Mexico City and Athens, Toronto is new this year. And of course, we've had events and have events next week in London and Madrid, and next year in Zurich. So we're very pleased with the global expansion of our message and our mission. And we have 6,000 registrants attending all events this 2.5 weeks. So by the time Thanksgiving rolls around, I'm finally going to get some sleep. But I want to thank all of you in the leadership committee for bringing today's event to Atlanta. And I have some really important statistics to share with you, because 50/50 Women on Boards presents ever since 2010, when we started our organization, we track the results of how companies are doing related to how many women are on their boards, both quarterly and annually. We develop our survey called Gender Diversity Index, which you can also find on our website 5050WOB, when we analyze the percentage of women on boards. So I want to tell you today that we are ecstatic about the national level that we women have achieved. The bottom bar there shows you that women have gotten to higher than ever in history. 25.6% of all corporate board seats in the Russell 3000. And those are the 3,000 largest companies in the country. Of those 3,000 companies, 25.6% of the seats are now held by women. And it's a 3-point increase over last year, where 22.6% were held by women. The red bars on this slide are the overall statistics for this year, and the last year's statistics are on the gray bars. And you'll see that there are about 30,000, give or take 30,000 seats on the Russell 3000 nationwide, and women hold 7,000 of those. Doesn't sound like a lot compared to 50% that we want to get to, but the fact that we've made it to the halfway mark is really terrific. And we work with our partner Equilar, who provides the basic research, and we develop the analysis for publication and for all of you to get to know the real facts about where we stand as women. So the next slide tells us about Georgia. We're also happy to share with you that Georgia, if you'll see the bottom bar there, is now at 24% of the board seats in Georgia are held by women. And this is a 2% percentage point increase since last year. And it's very close to the national level of 25%, as you see. And nationwide, going back to our company rankings for nationwide, we're pleased, since our goal is to reach gender balance. We're so pleased that 7% of the nearly 3,000 companies that we follow, 7% have already achieved gender balance. And that's 215 companies out of the total. But and a long way to go, certainly a long way to go. But the fact that major companies have already achieved 7% is a great indicator that we're heading in the right direction. And as you'll see, the second bar this year, the companies with 3+ women, that's at least 3 or more women on their boards, are now at 34% of the Russell 3000. And that's a significant improvement from last year, which was 26% of companies had 3 or more women on the boards. And then, of course, the last bar is very exciting, because the number of boards with no women has reduced, obviously, because of our messaging and our constant gentle collaboration and advocating for this mission. The number of nationwide companies is down to 4%, which is practically nothing. And you can say it's 3% lower than last year. We are very pleased with that. Very pleased. So let's talk about Georgia in terms of company rankings. 3 out of the 79 companies, that is 54%, are gender balanced. See, the 3 out of the 79 companies in Georgia that are on the Russell 3000 are gender balanced, which gives us 4% of the companies. And that's better than last year, which was only 1%. But we're really pleased to see that the 3+ number is moving up in Georgia, up to 35%, which is 3 points higher than it was at 32%. And the last bar, the number of companies with no women is now down to 1%, which is nothing. So congratulations, Georgia, on continuing to move in the right direction. And how many women will it take for Georgia companies to become gender balanced? Well, it's not really too many. It's 165. The range is between 165 to 291 women. And we figure that because the lower number is related to if a woman takes the place of a man on a board, and the higher number is if boards add a seat in order to accommodate more women on their boards, which most companies are doing. Most companies are actually adding seats since they're not having retirements right now. If that might be the case, they're adding seats in order to bring on women. And that's what has happened in California as a result of the law. 200 seats were earned by women in the first year, 2019, the first year of the law. And by the end of this year, there'll be another 300 plus seats on California boards of the Russell 3000. So we're making progress. The area that's making progress, I guess you'd say, but that we really need to work on is the number of women and men of color on corporate boards. In the research, we rely on self-identification for board members to identify if they are what their racial and ethnic background is. If they don't self-identify, it can't be tracked. So right now, 17% of all board members, only 17% are tracking or are self-identifying. And of those, to our best estimate, men of color hold 7% of those self-identified board seats, women of color, only 4%. Our goal at 50/50 Women on Boards not only is to reach gender balance, but also to make sure that and to encourage that all board seats, 20% would be held by women of color. So we have a dual goal that we're working toward. And we encourage, in order to self-identify, that all of you who are corporate directors and those who are aspiring and almost corporate directors, definitely go to Equilar, to the Board Edge, their Board Edge profile link that they have, and identify who you are and include your racial or ethnic background. Otherwise, we really can't track it. And that's in your chat. The last slide, of course, shows you just in a dramatic way how low the numbers of women and men of color are. Next slide, please. As you can see, compared to those who don't self-identify, the numbers of women and people of color in these categories are very, very low. So at 50/50, we call for companies to be intentional when searching for diverse board candidates, to reach far outside their own networks in order to find potential candidates. And likewise, men and women in seats of power need to serve as allies and sponsors to advocate for women of color who should be advancing into leadership roles. So these results are far from our goal, but we're certainly on the way. And that's why the 30 conversations we're holding in all the major cities, and the educational and workshops that we do year-round, which you can find on our website, 5050wlb.com. These are the avenues where we're helping to train women of all racial and ethnic backgrounds to seek out and secure board seats. So with that, let's go to Bea Perez. Thank you, Bea, for being our great moderator today, and looking forward to hearing from this terrific panel. Thanks, Bea.
Thank you, Betsy. And I think we can all agree that we're very fortunate that you started this journey long before so many others have just started to jump on the trend. And you've made a real difference for women all around the world. So thank you for that. And thank you to Mitzi and to Britton for taking on the co-chair role in the event today here in Atlanta. I'm very encouraged by those Atlanta numbers, although as I'm highly competitive, I want to know how we rank against everybody else. And I want to make sure Atlanta and the state of Georgia becomes number one. So not good until we get there. And I'm sure we can find 300 women listening into the call today to join us and be nominated into those great boards. So with that, let's go ahead and bring on the panelists. You saw some of the names earlier in the flash slides that were shown earlier. I'll go ahead and make some introductions, but I'm not going to spend that much time on their bios because you can read those online. I want to get right into the conversation and hear their thinking. So for that, let me just start with Katie Bain. And I start with Katie Bain as she's the founder and president of Bain Advisors and also a very dear friend, someone who was once my boss at the Coca-Cola company and I learned a tremendous amount from. And at the same time, she was one of those individuals who gave me the space to actually join not just different organizations to be able to learn and to do new things, but also when I worked for her, I was able to join my first public board of directors, and she gave me that space and the time to do it. So with that, thank you, Katie. Katie has an amazing amount of experience. She's also an advisor to Guggenheim. So if you're interested in Guggenheim Securities, she's a senior advisor over there. She has won so many awards. The list goes on and on. If you want to know what they are, and the ones I love all the names, from the Lions, the Pencils, the Effies, the Chloes, the Emmys, the list goes on. Today, just what's relevant to this group as well, she's on multiple boards. She has, 5 public board company experiences and 1 private. Just to give you a little bit of the background, the Honest Company. So you probably are familiar with that. And she's on the audit committee, which we all know is tough. She chairs the compensation committee. She also serves on the audit committee, another one of Acreage Holdings. She's on nominating corporate governance committee for Ergo. And the list goes on in terms of her philanthropic work as well. So with that, Katie, thank you for joining the panel today. I'm going to keep bringing on the rest, and I'll ask you to sit tight for a few minutes.
Thanks, Bea.
You're welcome. So let's go on and bring on Rohit Verma. So Rohit is the Chief Executive Officer for Crawford & Company. Rohit is also a member of the board of directors for Crawford & Company, is the world's largest listed independent provider of claims management and outsourcing solutions to insurance companies and self-insured entities. I know that's a mouthful. Google it. It's quite amazing. I was Googling it before we got on the call. Has 9,000 full-time employees and 50,000 seasonal employees with 700 offices that are serving clients around the world. Rohit's actually patching in from London today in the hotel room. So thank you for doing that. And I know that we're going to be very interested to learn a little bit about your journey, as we know that you've won several awards yourself. And I won't disclose your age, but some of them list you as under 40. So that's all I'm saying. But thank you, Rohit, for joining us, because we all know also that we need, as you saw the numbers, we need more diversity on the boards, but we also need more men to help the women get onto the boards. So thank you. You're welcome. Let's go ahead and introduce Virginia Hepner. Virginia is another individual just near and dear to my heart. She's someone who has been actively involved in the Atlanta community as president and CEO of Woodruff Arts. And even before that, just has played such a strong leadership role in Atlanta in terms of being a corporate executive, helping to further other women's careers. Today, she's the director of Cadence Bank Corporation, National Vision Holdings, Inc., and Oxford Industries. So multiple boards, once again, serving on multiple committees from nominating and governance to audit. As you know, she has a strong financial background from when she retired at Wachovia as a EVP after 25 years in corporate finance. We know that a lot of people always ask, will you serve on audit committees? And so this is an area of importance and an area that she comes highly skilled. The other thing, too, is just some amazing awards and recognitions. The one award I just want to bring up is the City of Atlanta Phoenix Award. That is a Lifetime Achievement Award. You're welcome. And that is one that is very hard to earn and wonderfully achieved by Virginia. So thank you for joining. And let's go ahead and bring on Vanessa. So Vanessa Allen Sutherland, and not to be confused with the name of the company she works for. She's Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Officer for Norfolk Southern Corporation. She's a tremendous leader, taking on some incredible, different dynamics in this new world. And she's joining us here today with also some board experience of recently joining the Eastman Chemical Company. And I'm going to go into sort of the first question is going to end up being for Vanessa, because while I could go on and list all of her accomplishments from what she's done in terms of being the chairperson of the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board in Washington, D.C. I'm going to spare that for part of her telling you her journey. But Vanessa, as I kick off the first question to you, there's a lot of, I guess there's some goodwill in the world where people do understand the benefits of what Betsy painted the picture on diversity in corporate boards and how to actually bring in new thinking. But then there's also space in terms of regulation that's starting to come. There's some countries that mandate having women on boards now, even in California. You see some of the local laws are changing. And what's interesting to me, though, is I look at your career history and you sort of were leading the charge in terms of your journey of building your career path to almost position you to get into this space where not only are you in the sweet spot of where all of this is coming together, but also how you're bringing others forward with you. So Vanessa, could you share with us a little bit of your journey and what's taken place over the last several years and any insights you might have to what you think is coming?
Awesome. Well, thanks, Bea. And it's really nice to see Virginia too, and meet new friends as well on this call. But my journey was a little bit more serendipitous. I would love to say it was mapped out, effortlessly or thoughtfully. But I think most of us realize that even if you have a credential, a PhD, an MBA, a JD, and all of the letters that come with it, you really need years of experience to be able to be positioned to be in a boardroom and help ask the right questions, provide oversight and guidance, and really help keep them focused on the strategy. And so my career started out in law firm, corporate America, as in-house counsel. I worked for a large Fortune 15 global company. I worked for, everyone who knows me well knows I worked for WorldCom. That's a training in and of itself. When you're involved in understanding and unpacking how a board and an executive team just engaged in, at that point, the world's largest accounting fraud. And so that I had a lot of serendipitous training that you couldn't ask for, it being part of a NASDAQ delisting hearing and going with my general counsel at the time. And so I would say that there were several things in that journey that then led me to take a political appointment in a prior presidential administration, which gave me a completely different view of how corporate America is affected by policy and politics. And when you bring that back to corporate America, it's like a secret weapon, because now you sort of know how the sausage is made and who you need to engage, and that no stakeholder should ever be ignored. Do not ignore the community organization, the standards developing bodies, the state, local, municipal, federal government peers, the bankers. You really begin to understand that your stakeholder portfolio is pretty darn large if you want to be successful in business. And so what positioned me predominantly to be on boards are three things. And I've thought about this a lot, because I thought, am I just lucky and not that good? You have to work hard, but some of this just sort of falls into place. But relationships really matter in boards and board seats. And I treat everybody like I'm going to meet them 20 years later, because in fact, I have run into them 20 years later. And you need to make sure you actually care about the people around you, because at the end of the day, board members are finding people that they think are going to be a good fit. And when you have a crisis, when you have an accounting scandal, who do you want to be in the trenches with, working through those solutions? And that's part of the dynamic. So developing good relationships. But I'm going to say something, because we're on 50-50 women on boards. I think in hindsight, what really positioned me and this is my last 2 points, are asking and learning, and being willing to participate in organizations like this one, and become a member in organizations that are dedicated to women's advancement. And so when I say asking, I can't tell you how many times I offhandedly said, one day I'd love to be on a board, but a mentor or a boss or someone who could actually effectuate that was listening.
That's right. That's right. You were lucky to have those people listening, like I had, Katie in that space. And and so I'm going to turn it a little bit to Katie, which is, so to tie in what Vanessa said around asking and listening. So Katie, when you have people around you that you're mentoring and you're coaching and you're helping sort of to get them onto these boards and network these relationships, because also I I agree with Vanessa that relationships do matter, and sometimes you have to find the right ones to get in. But you were the epitome of the best networker on earth. I mean, you have relationships across the world, multiple industries. And so what are the ways that you push and you encourage others to network, but also to ask and have the courage to ask? What advice would you give to those individuals listening to what Vanessa just said?
Yeah, I think, and that's what's critical is sometimes the path to your first board is the most onerous, right? Because there's so many of the specs out there that say previous board experience required or preferred, and they're going to bump into someone who has it. And so I think and I really do believe this as I'm mentoring and developing some women to get ready. They have a broad skill set, but there are some key things that you can work on before. No matter what expertise you bring to the board, and I bring strategy and general management experience. Though it's my role in my regular job with Guggenheim and others. And so I bring that, but the financial acumen required, you can get at your own companies. You have to be able to speak through a P&L, you're voting on it, you have very serious matters. You may not be on the audit committee, but you have to be able to clearly understand the financial performance of an organization. It's your job on behalf of the shareholders. So a lot of that you can gain at your companies. Take the afternoon finance for non-finance people or whatever you need and find a mentor in the finance world to help you. And then secondly, I think it's on the networking question, and your very good question. A lot of these relationships do happen from business relationships you've had before. Making it clear, like Vanessa just said, that she was looking for this. And for me and you, we worked at a company where, in fact, and I'm not speaking out of school, and B's still wonderfully in the most senior position at Coke, and a real role model for so many women. I made it clear at Coke, where we had a very sort of distant relationship with our board, I wanted to get board experience. I needed to understand that. I was brought in and out of our boardroom to talk about topics, but it was very difficult to learn what being in a boardroom meant. And so it was actually our CFO, and Bian knows the story. At Coke, we were very serious about development. I devoted all of my development plan to the time I sat on that board. And so the company knew that. They knew I would be out of the office 4 times a year. And that was my development to make me more effective in understanding how to be effective at Coke. And so structuring that it's a win-win for the company, that you've built the skill required to be effective, and then turn on those networks. Because Gary knew a guy who wanted to rebrand home building. Home building was pretty far afield, but I know how to build brands, and I was able to be immediately effective, and he provided the path, and then be the same with you. Finding a manager that respects that development part of your work. And then finally, take leadership positions on nonprofit boards. It gets you ready for the governance, and it helps you communicate and contribute to the community where you live, which is always valuable. And you might bump into a potential board hiring manager who's on another board. So
I think those are great pieces of advice. And Katie, you definitely practice what you preach. And I think that kind of ties nicely to when you make the ask, make sure you know what's in it for the company, what's in it for yourself. Because if both are getting some added value out of it, then it can be a win for the company you currently work for. And those relationships really matter. And so, and not being afraid to tap into them. And Rohit, you play a little bit of an interesting role because you're a CEO. So you have your own board. You're also on boards. And you have employees who want to be on boards. And you're also a gentleman who has a diverse background yourself, but also who can actually invite women to join your boards, which is one of the problems we know we're trying to solve. So tell us a little bit about, from your perspective, as you hear what Vanessa and Katie are saying, does it resonate as a CEO with someone who could make a decision to actually allow one of your executives to join boards? Does it resonate for some of the skills that you start to look for on your own boards? And share with us a little bit of your perspective and take.
Sure. First of all, I think everything that Vanessa has said and Katie has said makes a lot of sense, because I think that not just getting on boards, but to get to a board, trying to get to an executive position, three things I think matter the most. The first, Vanessa talked very well about, which is a career of diverse experiences. Because at the end of the day, when you're on a board, you're going to make judgments. And how do you make judgments? They come from your wisdom. And what is wisdom? Is a collection of your experiences. So the more diverse experience you have, the better judgments you'll make. I think Katie and Vanessa will agree with me that we're on a board. We're probably there for 1 day a quarter or 2 days a quarter. We probably looked at the material 5 days in advance, and we don't have the luxury of going down into very, very deep detail. So oftentimes we don't have all the facts, and we have to make a judgment call and then request some facts so that we can make decisions or prove things on a board. So I think diversity of experience extremely critical. I think second, which Katie, you touched upon, is really a building an eminence and building your brand. Like, what do you stand for? Who are you? What do you bring to the table? And I think that you can have a diverse experience, but you still need to have a strong brand, a spike. I think, Vanessa, you talked about your spike that you developed by serving in the office of the president or serving in with the cabinet. I think that kind of a spike just helps create a very specific eminence about you. And I think that is critical. And then finally, which we talked about just now, was creating a network in communities of interest. So you've got to have an interest. I would urge everybody that being on boards is tough. And what I mean by tough is, you have to put in a lot of effort. You have to take a lot of interest. So if you're not genuinely interested in that sector, in that space, in that topic that organization is involved in, it's going to be very hard for you to be passionate. So I think creating a network that is truly in your community of interest is important. I'm very fortunate to talk to a number of people who've been board aspirants. And I think sometimes I feel, and which is why I think there's an underrepresentation of individuals of color as well as women, because there's a lack of confidence. They want to network. Sometimes I talk to people and I say, well, why aren't you networking? And they say, well, I'm just not that interesting. Or, I've heard some people say that, I'm really not that funny and I'm not a born sort of salesperson. So I really struggle to network. I've also heard people say, well, what do I have to offer if I go meet with someone? And I think that we as leaders need to build confidence in people. Like I tell people that have mentoring someone, I say, look, it's not about what you're getting out of mentoring. It's also what I'm getting out of mentoring you. And it is truly something that I'm learning from it. And we need to help people build that confidence, individuals that we come across with and that we mentor, to say, look, you are an interesting person. There's a lot to your life that people want to know. There's a lot to your experiences that others want to know. And I think people don't network or sometimes don't build their eminence because they don't feel they're good enough. So how do we create that confidence in them that you as an individual bring your unique self, and that is good enough, right? If you reach this far in the organization if you reach this far in your career, there is something in you that has brought you here. And I think that's a missing piece from my perspective.
I think that's fantastic. I'm going to try together your C's, your confidence and communities of interest, because I think that actually is what equates to your brand. And so that's very clear, is really ensuring that you know who your brand is and what you stand for. And those are the areas that will start to define you. And I agree with you. I think that, people should recognize that you're interesting to someone else. You might not be interesting to yourself, but you're going to be interesting to somebody else.
That's right.
That's right. And so let me now, I'm going to pivot into Virginia, and I want to give her the hard question. So we're going to go to the hard ones. So we're going to pull a few themes in, which is, really knowing what you stand for, making the ask, ensuring there's value on both sides. Katie also said something in terms of your not-for-profit or philanthropic experience on boards can actually help you pivot into the corporate.
Right.
You have it all, Virginia. You've done it all. And you've also faced roadblocks. And I've heard you in other luncheons discussions talk about some of those. And I think it's important to be candid for this audience. Do you or do you not believe that actually your not-for-profit experience will translate? Will people give you credit for it? And if you have skeptics, how do you get them to overcome that as a roadblock? And what are the other watch outs that you would advise this audience on?
Well, thank you, B, and it's great to be with everyone. And there's nothing I disagree with anything you said, so that's also affirming. And I would highlight regarding the nonprofit sector, and sometimes people look at my career track and say, "Wow, that was so strategic. You really planned all these things of transitioned from finance to, corporate and leadership roles in the nonprofit. None of that was really planned. The first chapter was planned, right, in finance and all that. And the second was opportunistic, but it does relate to your question, which was nonprofit service. One of the reasons I went into banking is because it's a business that requires and encourages community service. And it aligned with my values, as well as it's a win-win for the company as well as me personally, and hopefully the community. And I look back, and I served on more than a dozen nonprofit boards, even before I became a corporate person. And I remember, and someone gave me the advice to say, this is a great experience. Treat it just as seriously as you treat your job, because people are relying on you, number one. And I literally remember the first board I was on, I was 30 years old, and it was American Red Cross local chapter. I saw great public service. And I was sitting next to the COO, Cox Enterprises. And I was watching him govern. Right. And so I learned, I just intentionally paid attention to how he governed, how he solicited advice and encouraged inclusion. And again, these are people who don't report to each other. These are volunteers. Much harder job, frankly, than if you have a for-profit situation. So I very intentionally, and I would encourage everyone to take, and I'm sure they do, if they have good values and been invited, but take those roles very seriously. And you never know when your paths will cross again, because actually 2 of the boards I'm currently on are because of my service in the nonprofit sector. They had nothing to, they wanted me because of my skills and background, but I knew them because we had worked together in the trenches on some difficult things that frankly, just illustrates what your brand is. Are you truly client oriented? Are you truly dedicated to shareholder service and community service? And we've just gone through this COVID crisis, which has proven, if anything, it's who you're on the board with and the stewardship you advise and you work with management in terms of getting through very challenging times, which we're not through yet. That's when it's illustrative of good choices and some bad choices, but I'm thrilled to say the 3 boards I'm on just validated why I was there. And it's really alignment of values, how you treat your employees, how you treat your clients, what your priorities are, financial discipline, all those things that we've all had to learn in our careers. Those are all things that you must have in the boardroom, and candor, frankly. So you could, that's another C for you.
It is. I'm collecting the C's right now.
Right.
Well, that's definitely, and certainly you are all those things. You are very, as anyone gets to know you, you're very honest and direct with people, but you're also one of those individuals who everyone knows the spirit and the intent in terms of you're always trying to improve upon things and help people even be better. And so, it's been a challenging time. And you brought up the fact that, we just went through and we're still in the middle of a pandemic, a very difficult last 2 years. And Vanessa, I want to come back to you. You actually joined one of your boards during these very difficult time periods. And I want to get a flavor for you, because some people will say, oh, you can't get anything done during the pandemic. How do you network and meet people on the videos? How did that happen for you? And what was different? And did you think it was easy, harder? What's your sort of take in terms of making sure that we don't let the pandemic or the lack of in-person be the excuse for why we don't get people onto boards during this time period?
That's such a great question. And it really relates to what Virginia said just a second ago, and that is the relationships. If you have some level of familiarity with people, they're willing, even though I did go through 2 different search firms as they were looking at a slate of potential candidates, and both companies, Southern Company Gas and Eastman Chemical, were striving for more diversity, women in the boardroom, more diverse candidates. And they were pulling together those slates. But I'm not sure, B, in all honesty, how I would have fared in those scenarios if I was unknown. And it just so happened that I had relationships with, in one case, the recruiter who was familiar with me because I'd used them to hire others. And like Virginia, I knew of other people on the boards, either from my time at Altria, aka Philip Morris, or in organizations that had nothing to do with my day job. And it's amazing that when they think about the skill set, yes, there is a new wave, and I'm thrilled for it that there's a new push to have more lawyers in the legal perspective, regulatory perspective on boards now. There, if as many of you know, there was a shift a couple decades ago to get away from that. You needed more innovators and finance folks, and so we're kind of coming back full circle. So there was a convergence of, I am a woman, I am diverse, and I happen to be a lawyer. So it was, I think, on its face, helpful in putting me on the slate, but ultimately it was having some level of comfort with the people on the Zoom calls and Teams calls, because you can still get to know people two-dimensionally. As we've learned, we've onboarded a lot of new employees at our own company during the pandemic. The world didn't stop. The world hasn't stopped. And when you needed to meet them, we would go out in masks and socially distance ourselves, and I was still able to meet the board members. But to the second part of your question, people not using the pandemic or financial crisis or anything else as an excuse. There are so many higher profile women nowadays, and part of that's just because of the advent of social media and LinkedIn and a more robust participation in 50-50 Women on Boards or Direct Women, or you name it, and name any other organization, that in those circles, it does absolutely help when there is a time for onboarding to be able to call upon your network. So building that network and having the network, I think it made it slightly easier for me to become integrated in a two-dimensional world to a board where you usually want to meet your board members and get a sense of chemistry. But not having that luxury during the pandemic, we defaulted to, hey, B, I know B, or oh, I've met Virginia, and we were much more creative and intentional about finding the connections that otherwise would have organically come out in a happy hour or a coffee chat. But it allowed for us using that technology, not just for remote engagement, but to really be more thoughtful of, how do I find the things in common and experiential overlap, professional overlap, family overlap, that gives us something to talk about in this world where we're no longer three-dimensional. So I would caution anybody in using, Zoom excuses or two-dimensional apathy, because the world continued moving on, and we kept in top of mind, like, who would I love to be on this board with me? And that exercise still happens, even if you're somewhat constrained in how often you can meet face-to-face.
That's right. Yes, go ahead.
Can I say something? I think something else that's also changed for lots of reasons, mostly good ones, is that it used to be, because I've been on a public board more than a decade, it used to be you only considered sitting CEOs. And clearly, because of lack of pipeline and all kinds of reasons, there aren't that many sitting CEOs, and especially Fortune 500s, whatever. And then if you go down, and so I think the advent of technology and the need to understand technology and branding and a lot of things beyond finance and legal has really opened the door to not only being more open to different candidates, but also the requirement to have different backgrounds. And that has, I think, led the doors to be opened for people in huge jobs. They just don't happen to be the CEO, but the skill sets that we want.
I think that's another great observation, which is, I think, not just the pandemic, but life has taught us a lot of things can actually be done and possible. And back to Ty and Rohit's earlier comments, I think people found that the stories that they're hearing from the women in large leadership roles are actually very interesting. And they're beginning to realize that it requires depth and knowledge of the businesses, the financial acumen that Katie spoke about earlier. And so a lot of boards now are more than willing to go beyond the traditional type of skill set and roles. But I'm gonna ask Rohit to answer this next question. And I know we're getting near the end of the panel, so I'm gonna give everyone a quick heads up so my panelists can think about this. At the end, I'm gonna do a fast round robin, and I'm just gonna ask you to say two things. One thing that you think everyone should, stop doing while they're starting to interview for boards, and one thing they should start doing. So what should they stop doing? And what should they start doing? That's gonna be the closing question. But Rohit, back to you, which is, So what are the things that you see that maybe no one wants to talk about? Tell us the things that maybe you all and your fellow directors might go off into another room and say, she or they didn't really bring this to the table. What are the things that maybe are not as politically appropriate to say? And you don't have to go so unpolitical. I know you're a CEO and you have to protect your reputation. But what are sort of the little micro nuances that you want to, share with this audience that you're like, you know what, when you're coming in for the interviews, still remember this. Like these things are still important to make sure you're being thoughtful about. So would love to hear what you have to say there.
Sure. And, one thing I would reflect on, and I would say that at the end of the day, when someone is going to nominate you for the board and appoint you on the board, they're making a bet on you, right? That's a bet. And the question then becomes, how do you create the confidence in the search committee for the board that you're the right person to make a bet on? And human behavior, and I'm not talking about the board that I'm on, this is just standard human behavior, is to do business with people you know, like, and trust, right? That's just standard human behavior. So when someone's going to make a bet on you, at the end of the day, they're going to want to put the person that they know, like, and trust. And then question for you becomes, and I think Vanessa talked about this beautifully in terms of how creating that knowing, liking, and trust doesn't have to be limited to a three-dimensional interaction, that you can actually create that interaction in 2 dimensions, which we are on right now. And I think that's the piece, right? So when at the end of the day, and I'm not just limiting this to the board, even if you're hiring an executive, the search committee meets in a room and says, okay, guys or girls, and ladies and gentlemen, what is it like, yay or nay? And sometimes there's a tie, right? In terms of just the basic skills. I always think there are skills and there are capabilities, right? So first thing is you look for skills. First thing is you look for capabilities. And capabilities are, do they have the work ethic? Do they collaborate? Do they have the ability to learn, right? These are lifetime of learnings, right? You don't learn them in a 6-month stint. And then you have skills, which is, are you a lawyer, which you've learned, right? Are you a finance person? Do you have the ability to read a P&L? Do you have the ability? And I think oftentimes what we find is individuals that are for these positions, it's a tie. So how do you break that tie? And I think that breaking the tie comes from who gives you that feeling of knowing, liking, and trust. And that's what I would say. So whatever you can do in terms of your pre-work, where there's that common understanding in that search committee, where someone says, I can pound the table for this individual, that's the tiebreaker, and that makes the difference.
I think that's an incredible way to think about it, because know, like, and trust ties into, do you trust someone to have that candid conversation that Virginia spoke about? Are you able to have candor without having a dysfunctional board or a dysfunctional conversation? It needs to be productive and drive an outcome. And while we wait for Virginia's technology to pop back up on here, before I go to the last question, because we have a little bit more time, I want to go. No, that's okay. I'm gonna go to Katie for another question, and then I'll go towards the last questions. But Katie, you also talked about it in terms of fit, and so can you dig a little bit deeper and tell us your experiences now that you're also on nominating and governance? And for those of you listening in, typically nominating and governance is where sort of they're the first door in for someone who's new being considered for a board. So how do you all talk about fit when you're having that same conversation?
Yeah, I think my big thing on fit and approaching what we all need and want in our boards around the world in order to deliver value for shareholders is the highest level of performance. It is a proven fact that diversity in opinions in the room lead to higher performance results in decision making. And so for me, in terms of fit, B, it's a really an important thing that the boards that you're looking at, and this is for anyone looking at a board opportunity, asking for the matrix of skills and experience of the current board. And if they say, we don't know what you're talking about, do the work on their website. Take a look at each director. Some of them are all lawyers or all financial people. You can see they have a gap. Most companies today, due to Sarbanes-Oxley and Say on Pay, are operating with an OmGov committee who produces a matrix. It's a one piece of paper that you update every year that encapsulates the board's experience and skills against the strategy of the company. Both of those things change. People change, their lives have to go away. A new CEO comes in with a different set of skills, or the business is changing and the long-term strategy is moving and they need to transform in a digital fashion or something like that. So making it your work to understand that matrix helps you know if there's going to be a fit. And because where you're going, this is a lot of work, to Rohit, to everyone's examples. This is a very fulsome opportunity and a very serious one. You're representing shareholders, people's lifetime savings, big movements in financial performance of funds. You have a very serious responsibility as a board member. And so therefore that fit, knowing that your skills are additive, and that also finally for me, as Vanessa said, getting on and using Zoom to have one-on-one conversations with the CEO who's in place, the chairman, and all of the board members, and making sure that there is a fit, that you understand where perhaps someone is reticent or perhaps someone is going, but the business case on diversity and understanding that the organization understands this isn't because there's legislation coming in California. This is because we want higher performance decision-making in the boardrooms and in the executive committees of our organizations. That makes the shareholders more positive and confident that their investments in the future of these great ideas that help businesses and communities are sound. So I think fit is multi-level. It's about skills, experience, personalities, and culture. And the work you can do on that is there. And then my final comment would be, that I find such great environments in my board environment. It's different from any other. You go in, it's like the best collaborative decision making. You each have a unique set of skill sets you're bringing to something. As Rohit said, you've got some knowledge, but you're really bringing the strength of your experience to help this executive team make better decisions.
Very well said. And so that cannot be summarized any more beautifully. So with that, Katie, you're going to get the start of the end. So we're going to go Katie, Rohit, Virginia, and then Vanessa. So what would you tell people to stop doing as they're pursuing the boards? What would you tell them to start doing? And then I'll just let you pass it on over to the next one.
Okay. My stop would be stop just considering boards that look like the industry you're in. With lots of companies, new regulation from banks requiring that as companies look at going public, they're looking for board members earlier. They're looking for board members, and this may be a company that's, just going public. So don't anchor your search only in companies that look like the one you're in. Look more broadly. Stop doing that. And start, I would say, be fluid in the business case and the enunciation. For the first time ever, women are over the majority of undergraduate graduates, law school a few years ago, business school 2 years ago, and this year for the first time, med school. So if these companies want to have the highest performance teams, they'd better be representing the best and the brightest coming out of the universities and grad schools in this country. So those facts and being fluent in them, even if you're up against a board member who's like, yeah, I got to bring a woman on the team, that's not why. And you don't have to preach, but you got to be confident in your reasoning why you want to do this.
Beautiful. Rohit, your turn.
Stop having any self-doubt about whether you can or cannot get on the board. Be confident that you can, and start building your brand towards it.
Excellent. Virginia?
So I would stop spreading yourself too thin. I think people sometimes too much scattershot effort, and start with a gap assessment of yourself. Because the thing I love about continuing to be on for-profit boards is the learning and continuous improvement, and frankly the competitiveness of it. And so do a gap assessment of what I would like to learn more. And the one I'm working on is ESG, which I've learned so much from B. Thank you, because it is the rest of our lives, which is a good thing. But particularly on the S side. And so deepen your knowledge and run was always taught run your company as if regulations didn't exist. So try to do the right thing and the best thing, because it will be found out if you're not.
That's right.
So that's my advice.
Thank you, Virginia. Let's go to Vanessa.
Well, those are all phenomenal pieces. It's hard to go last, but I'm going to say, start joining organizations like these that are actually dedicated to helping you build a network, understand what it takes to be on a board, and be very intentional about using that opportunity, not just to improve yourself, but to start pulling up the women who you think are 3, 4, 5 years out, so that you can start to help them develop, so that they're not in the situation that you're in potentially of scrambling to get a board resume, which is not a resume for all who are listening, and who you can then partner with while you're being mentored. You can be pulling them and making sure that the pipeline doesn't become depleted. And I would say, stop looking at the company that you are either targeting or that has reached out to you to be on the board as an isolated entity. Rohit acknowledged this a minute ago very well. You need to help the CEO and the C-suite. So stop looking at them as, this is going to be great because I'll be on X board, which was great branding. Start looking at their competitors, so that when and if you join that board, you actually understand the challenges, the external risks that they're facing, the competitive problems that they potentially are going to experience. And then you can help be a better strategist of where those competitors are going to help drive your company, once you're on that board, into a place that helps position them to be a leader and not a laggard. So don't be tunnel vision, I would say. Stop being focused on getting on X company and really understanding the landscape around them before you join.
Oh, what great advice. And I feel honored and privileged to be a part of moderating this panel with Katie, Rohit, Virginia, Vanessa. What incredible experiences you have that you've shared today. And with this audience, I know they've learned a lot. I think we've found the 300 individuals tuning in who can potentially take those board seats now. And they'll know that they have to really think of what's their community of interest. Are they confident? Do they have the ability to have the candor? Continuous learning. You can tell I like C's because I work for Coca-Cola. And so with that, I just want to say, exactly, and Dasani, and we have them all. But I just want to thank everyone again. And I want to thank Betsy for continuing the journey for all of us in terms of diversity on boards, women on boards, and really helping to keep the movement going. I want to turn it back to Britton and to Mitzi, the co-chairs of the Atlanta event, and thank them for having us all here today.
Great. Thank you, Bea, so much. That was
Great
insights from our esteemed VIP panel. Please join me in thanking them for their contribution and expertise today and for paving the way. Really.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, now we're excited to continue our conversation with our directors and coaches by taking a deeper dive on how we can prepare or advance your opportunity for board service now or in the future. So in order to access your tailored breakout session, all you will need to do is click on the My Agenda button at the left side of your screen. You will see your breakout room, click the session, and then click Join Now. It's just as simple as that. If you are having issues accessing your breakout room, please go to the Help Center to the left of your screen or email events@5050wob.com. Again, that's events@5050wob.com. The email is located also in the description of your session. We look forward to working with all of you as we continue to drive momentum and progress towards gender balance and diversity on corporate boards. And we thank you again for your support and commitment to this initiative.
Thank you all. What a great event.